vibe was getting too long. So back to what we were doing. I'm not really talking about nothing, but I'm just listening to a video about Danny Collins as I finish this t-shirt that I'm painting of him. Okay. I'm not even going to be painting that long. I'm just going to finish the hair, and that's about it.
Swim up, my head hits the camper because there's so much water. So like I'm trying to get up, I'm just being brushed with water. My head hits the camper and I'm like, shoot, like I can't get out of here. And when a vehicle sinks, like it doesn't go completely. Like it started like level out a little bit, like as the water's filling, but there's still a back corner pocket of air in the back of this truck, and I go get that pocket of air and I catch a little bit of my breath and I start banging on the hatch to get the hatch open. And finally, like the corner pops open. And as the truck is going completely under, I'm coming out at the same time. So it was like a vacuum, it was like a black hole. Like it pulled me, like it was pulling me under as I'm trying to get out, but I feel somebody like pull me up. And so I finally get up to the air. In my mind, I'm still running.
Are you
but I'm,
kidding me?
Out of breath, I'm panicking.
How
And
did this
the
tear
vehicle
you?
goes completely under.
I know you're
I
kidding
look
me.
on one side of the road, I look on the other side of the road, I see top lights, I'm still running.
How did
I
that
see a
tear
Q-beam
you?
shine in the water. So
Just a
after I
freaking-
started trying to swim, this canal is called
It tore a
Canal
hole in
Fort
the
Pierce.
shirt.
It's a
That's
strong canal,
nice.
it goes out to the river, it runs all the way from Lake
Really?
out to the Singing River, all the way out to the
That's
river.
crazy.
And
That messes
stone
up the whole
current.
shirt.
So I realized I can't swim in this current, I'm done. So I was like, you know what, I give up, I surrender. I swim to this Q-beam shine in the water. I get to the land, and it's a steep
Messed
climb.
up.
It's like a steep canal bank. It's filled with high grass, and
How in the world
I end
did
up getting
this
up on the canal bank,
break
and I black out. I completely pass out. And when I wake up, it's the next day, and I'm laying there on the side of the canal bank. I'm covered in blood. All I got on is a t-shirt and boxers were used to. The current was so strong, it ripped my shorts off, it ripped my shoes off. I had a pair of Chuck Taylors, ripped
Cut a
my shoes
hole.
off. My whole leg sliced open, the bottom of my foot sliced open, and I started screaming,
You're lucky you didn't bleed to death.
Yeah. What's that?
You said you're lucky you didn't bleed to death.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time went by or gators. This is Florida, that canal, and then I didn't drown. But so yeah, when I wake up and I'm covered in blood, I start screaming. Next thing you know, a cop and an ambulance comes up, and I don't know how much time went by, but they get out of
Okay,
their
that's the picture.
vehicles and they're looking in the water. They're not even looking over at me. Then they hear me scream. They start coming over. Well, first thing I do is start cussing them out. Like, you MFers pulled me out of this truck. You left me here for dead. I need you to the hospital. And they were like, we didn't pull you out of that vehicle, And I was like, if you didn't pull me out of the vehicle, how did I get here? And what brought you back to this spot? And they said, we thought you pulled a Houdini and disappeared. There was a lady on the corner of the street. I guess she heard somebody screaming, bloody murder for their life, and that there was a white male out here covered in blood, and that's what brought them back. I guess they got the call, and they came back to that spot, and they kept asking me who was driving. Like, that's all they were concerned with, and me being green to the system at the time, because technically that truck's in the vehicle, I'm on the side of the canal bank, anybody could have been driving, another driver that got away, but all I kept saying is I was driving. Who the hell else do you think was driving? Because in my mind, they pulled me out of this vehicle and they left me there. Like, I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but so they end up taking me to the hospital. My dad goes up there. He's there for a little while, and my girlfriend at the time, who was my wife now I'm separated from, she was getting ready to come up there, and as she's getting ready to come up there, they finally put me under arrest, and they handcuffed me to the bed, and I ended up getting 52.6 months in prison, followed by a year house arrest from that.
What did they charge you with, Danny? What was the all?
Two verbally occupied dwellings for my friend's house where my stuff was. And he even dropped the charges, you know. He didn't want to press charges. My dad gave him some money for restitution, and he dropped the charges. I was charged with two verbally occupied dwellings, two grand thefts, I think a burglary conveyance for going in the vehicle, his vehicle in the driveway, aggravated fleeing and eluding. They initially charged me with aggravating assault on an officer because they said that when my vehicle was pointed in his direction, he was in fear of his life.
Yeah.
And thank God, because it becomes a deadly missile. And I can only imagine, like, thank God I didn't get him. And, you know, is that would have been the end of my life. And then it is obviously the danger that, you know, when you're in active addiction, making these poor decisions that, you know, putting other people's lives in danger. And so they ended up dropping that down to a misdemeanor. And I had a possession of cocaine that I was already out on bond for. So I ended up having like 9 felonies. Particular case. Yeah. And they ended up putting all the cases together. Yeah, they gave me, you know, my first case.
And I know, Danny, you had kind of gone in and out of things with being arrested, but this was like your first real time in prison. What's that like for you to go in that world knowing that you're going to be there for a while?
Well, the first time, like, I ended up doing a year and a half in the county almost. I went to prison, so I only had to do like another 2 years in prison. And I went to a work camp, and it all happened so fast that it was like, that experience wasn't too crazy. It was definitely a different world, obviously. I think it was, you know, I got in trouble again. You know my story. And, are you there? Are you there? Hello?
Panel for the home.
I can't hear you.
Hold on a second. Danny, can you hear me now? Okay. So if we can go back to me talking where I was asking you that this happens to you, you're looking at time in prison, going into prison, and what is that like for you in your mind? Is that, hey, I'm gonna not be here for like a day or two, this is gonna be a life?
I mean, obviously it was super fearful at first. I did almost a year and a half in the county. They were offering me 20 years, 20 years, 20 years. I finally got out in front of a judge with a 10-year cap, and he gave me what I scored out to on my points, which was 52.6 months, followed by a year house arrest. When I went to prison, I had about 2 years left of time to do. They immediately sent me to a super low custody work camp. So my experience wasn't horrible the first time around. Obviously it was prison. Prison wasn't a great place, but I kind of stuck to myself. I didn't get caught up in the subculture of prison. And that time kind of went by pretty quickly. And it sucked. Obviously it sucked being away from family. The conditions of prison, you know, the food, everything, going from the life that I had lived before to being in this environment, and it was just completely different.
Not just it's inhumane.
But second time I went to prison is what ultimately ended up being like the worst experience of my life. So when I went to prison that first time, I came home, started doing really well. I worked at a treatment center. I ended up getting married, got somebody pregnant, and we had some issues. and I ended up relapsing, and I went back to prison. So I got charged with a burglary at my parents' house the second time I went to prison, and my parents just tried to call the cops to get me help, and ended up, picking up charges. My parents even tried to drop the charges. So the state offered me 15 years. Went to the state to sign paperwork to drop the charges. The state told my parents, "You're not the victim. You're our star witness. He didn't commit a crime against you. He committed a crime against the state of Florida." I ended up pleading out to 7 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation. So now this is 2 times that I went to prison. So the first time was like, not so bad in my mind. I got through it. It was obviously hard, but there was no rehabilitation. It was just a timeout from society. I lucked up and went to a super laid back spot that was a work camp, and it was, low custody. I didn't really have any issues. Second time, I got caught up in the subculture of prison. I was actively using. I was ended up joining a gang, and it just completely changed my life. I went in with no tattoos, came out covered in tattoos. Joined a gang, a white supremacist organization of all things, and it was at the height of the whole, Trump Black Lives Matters movement, and I started getting saying in my head that white males were being discriminated against in America, and you can't be a white Christian conservative, and so I got deeply into the politics of prison and all that, and it was just, my second time was a horrible experience, and being caught up in gang politics, being caught up in the prison world, and obviously it's very tribal. There was a lot of racism. There was a lot of people not getting, and I got along with a lot of people, but I also it was easy to get along with, and people kind of gravitated towards my story a little bit, that, I played professional baseball, and I played sports in prison, but I also started to get deeply influenced by, politics and right-wing, and became very racist, stuff that was already living inside of me started to come out at the height of, that, the whole Trump Black Lives Matter movement in 2016. So I think that experience in prison is whoa.
Well, I think it's interesting how, going into, like you said it really well, it's a primitive
Come back
environment.
out of there on the
tribal,
other
and
side, that's amazing.
You have, one of the things I always thought about when I was in was that, I was desperately afraid of losing myself, losing who I was. And I tried, to have a prison job that, I worked in, I just tried to do things that kept me feeling like me, because it's so easy to fall into the institutionalized feel of, I don't have any control, or the things I have control with, I'm doing because I'm in this prison. And it's a weird environment. It's a real mind play, I think, to create almost mind hacks to try to keep yourself being you. And I always wonder, because I had a 5-year sentence. I always wonder, somebody that has 20 years, how do you keep yourself sane enough to where you aren't totally institutionalized? The movie Shawshank is so deep because it has so many meanings to it and layers to it. But think about that one line that I think Red says. He said, when you first come in here, you look at these walls and they're to keep you in, and then as longer you're here, that the walls that put their arms around you and give you comfort. And that's kind of like the institutionalized feel of being inside prison.
And that's when I became institutionalized. It was the second time where I realized, okay, I'm in this for a while. And this is my life, this is my environment. I already did time, so I wasn't, as green as I was the first time around. I knew what to expect. I knew, and it does, it starts to, people become institutionalized because it's a different code for living in there. And it's street rules, and I tell people all the time, it's like if somebody comes in and takes something out of your locker, you're not going to knock on the window and tell the officer, hey, this guy took this out of my locker. No, you gotta And you gotta fight, you gotta like, you know, otherwise you become prey, because then there's, it's either predator or prey, you know, there's really not any in between, so like, whereas in society, you're taught that if somebody comes and takes something from you and you're not doing it while you're there, like steal something from you while you're not at your house, they can call the cops. And, you know, and you go through the proper channels of law enforcement. So like, it's just, the whole code of living for prison is completely different, and I became institutionalized, I became caught up in that world, and,
So, and knowing that, and when you were getting close to the door of getting out, what thoughts were going through your mind on how you
I
were
think
getting
I
back
messed
in?
up.
I was not preparing myself at all. Like, I was a mess all the way to the time I left prison. Like, prison did nothing to rehabilitate me. Like, I came out, the only thing that lucked up is I ended up going to confinement, like with almost like 30 days left, but I was at a work camp, I was trying to go over to the main unit to get, drugs, basically, to put back, because I was still actively up in that lifestyle, and I ended up getting caught being in an unauthorized area, and they put me in confinement, and within the last, 30 plus days, I ended up having time to like kind of dry out and clean up, and when I came home, I white knuckled it for a while, to where I was able to, I always do well enough where I can stay clean 6, 7, 8 months on my own, but then I go right back to that vicious cycle. And that's kind of what happened, even this last time when I came home, I did really well at first, and then I started to have problems, and I relapsed, bam, and almost real close to getting in trouble again, but this time they put me in mental health court. And mental health court absolutely changed my life. Like, it gave me access to therapy. I was able to deal with all the childhood trauma from, what it was like growing up with my parents and not knowing mom. I was able to deal with, obviously, my whole identity was in professional baseball. I didn't know what to do with my life after that. Like, who am I as a person? And I really got the chance to start to learn, like, who I am. I also got to see a psychiatrist. They put me on medication to kind of stabilize me, but learning how to process emotions and articulate how I'm feeling. And this is all through the courts. On top of
Danny, is that, I'm thinking that's, obviously, that's not a federal thing, so that's a state thing.
It's a state thing, and it's actually my local county thing, our 19th Judicial Circuit, man, and this program saved my life. I've been in that jail for 20 years. Never once did the system offer me help.
Froze up.
Are you there?
Yeah.
So I've been in that jail my entire life, and never once did the system offer me help. 20 plus years, they either slapped me on my wrist and sent me home, or they sent me to prison. There was never any, rehabilitation. Finally, and the only reason I was able to get rehabilitation this time is because my wife, who I'm separated from right now, paid $23,000 for a lawyer, and that lawyer was able to get me into mental health court. And mental health court changed my life. So mental health court, what they have here is that you get assigned a case manager, you got to see a psychiatrist, they'll put you on any medication if you need it, they diagnose you. Then you also have to see a therapist, you have to show up in court, at first, like once a month. You have to take drug tests. Initially I took drug tests 3 times a week. But it gave me resources and access to a team of people. I had 2 peer specialists, a case manager, a psychiatrist, and a therapist. And I started to get better. Like, miraculously, like, I had access to, I started to treat the trauma that I had from a child that I never knew how to process. I didn't know how to articulate what I was feeling. I knew what I was feeling. I knew I didn't feel right, but I couldn't describe it. I couldn't talk about it because I grew up in that household where we didn't talk about
You
feelings.
didn't talk about anything.
Yeah, you don't
You
show
didn't talk
emotion.
about the fact that you don't have a mom that she's probably somewhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You don't talk about that either.
And she ended up passing before I went to prison the second time. And my wife, at times, she ended up giving me the courage to call her. She was like, you need to give her a call, you need to get some closure, and I called her. And when I asked her, like, why she left, she said that, she already had a daughter from a different relationship, and she couldn't afford, like, the child support, and it was just a lot for her as a mother. And I was so mad at her. Like, I was like, that's a poor excuse, that's a cop-out. She ended up signing her rights over, and she wanted me to come see her. And I was just so mad that I was like, maybe when I get out of prison, I'll come see you. And when I was in prison, I ended up calling home, and I got the news that she was in hospice. So the lieutenant on the compound let me go call her, and I was able to call her. I forgave her, and within hours she ended up passing. So, but I struggled with that, and I finally got some closure with it, because I learned how to deal with it. And I realized that, it wasn't my fault that, I felt, rejected, and there was a lot of abandonment issues. And, it obviously affected my other relationships in life, and keeping people at arm's length and not trusting them and waiting for the other, foot to drop. But the other thing too, like even now, like I'm going through my child custody thing, and I realize that how hard it is and how much money it costs. It's cost me so much money to try to fight to see my son. And now I think about my mom, because before I always blamed her, like my dad was my hero. Like he manned up, he raised me, like.
Yeah.
But, there's always two sides to a story.
How
And
old is your son now, Dan?
he's 9,
Nine.
and he was born in September 2014. I was arrested December of 2014. I got out in 2021, and tried calling, was allowed to see my parents the entire time I was incarcerated, so about a month before I came home, and then she just stopped. And her reasoning for not allowing me to see him and trying to keep him out of my life is that she just flat out says that I'm going to relapse and go back to prison. Her fear is that why introduce him to me when I'm just going to do what I always do.
She doesn't trust your situation, right?
Yeah, and I understand the skepticism, but how long do you punish somebody? At what point do we say,
Lifetime.
yeah, okay, are they doing the work? Give them an opportunity. Because, as a convicted felon, like, if you're not working for yourself or creating your own little hustle, like, job opportunities aren't out there. Like, if you got that convicted felon label, and then
It's a lifetime label.
a lifetime label,
Yeah.
You can be denied housing, you can be denied jobs, you can be denied education, and I came home, I wanted to work at that. I tried to work, like, apply at, like, Home Depot and Target, places denied me. They said it was too recent.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for my boss here, with the shipping containers offering me a job, like, I don't know what I would have done.
Well, I love the story about that too, because he really identified with you, Danny, and said, hey, this could have been me. I could have, but you know what? I
It
chose
could be
to go this
anybody.
direction, and you took the fork and
But
moved to the
a
road.
lot
in
of
the other
people don't
direction.
realize it.
Oh, cool, because you're with somebody that you have a lot of talents, and he's using your talents that other people are checking off as not needed because
Wow.
of your,
Yeah. Of
being
this
an
past.
ex-felon, and you're given an opportunity here. Exactly how did that happen? I know that he said as far, but how did you find it? How did you find the opportunity?
So, in my community, my case manager for mental health court, got me to go to a place called Project Lift, which is a nonprofit. They teach trades to people coming out of incarceration into at-risk youth. And I was like, okay, well, people coming out of prison, if you got a felony, you're like basically relegated to blue collar jobs. Like that's all the jobs you're gonna be able to get, go work at the construction site or do something.
Right.
And that's not really where my skill set was. Like I wasn't raised to work with my hands and do manual labor, like I always did, marketing or sales or,
Right.
other jobs and stuff. So like, I was like, finally, I'll give them a chance because my experience with a lot of these nonprofits and stuff like that, especially if there are any government funding, is that it's superficial. Like they get the government funding, but they don't really do anything to help you. I was real skeptical at first, and then finally I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And it was legit. Like they were paying me $15 an hour to teach me a trade, and I was like, okay, like cool. So they had a Christmas party for like donors, and they asked me if I would work it. And I was like, sure. So I ended up working, picking up trash behind wealthy people, and basically, like, if they'd leave their cup down, I'd go throw it in the trash for them and stuff like that. And I was passing out T-shirts. And the owner of this company was there, and he asked the director of operations, he goes, I need some employees. Give me your best guy, one person. And the guy pointed to me and said, him, called me over there, introduced me to him, and he was like, hey, can you be to work tomorrow at, 7 a.m. or Monday at 7 a.m.? And I was like, absolutely. I showed up, I started working in the back, making these, helping to build. I didn't really have a skill set, but I was willing to work and learn and do whatever, I'm a fast learner. I was just like, you gotta show me. And even then, I'm still not like great with my hands. I'm not
either, Danny.
Yeah, just, I could tell you how to do it, but when I'm physically trying to do it myself, it's, yeah. But, I did that for about a month or two, and then he saw my ability to connect with people and network and my social media presence and stuff like that. And he said, you know what, your skills can be best you do somewhere else. And so he gave me opportunity to start working in sales. And then now I became the director of sales and, with business development. And we're looking to build communities of container homes. And there's so many different applications, obviously, like a starter home for young people, coming right out of college, or even, blue collar workers, whatever. There's also the application of helping the unhoused, people who are experiencing homelessness, and we're working with a nonprofit right now. That's what they want to do. Another nonprofit wants to provide veteran housing. So, like, I appreciate it because I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to come out of incarceration and be just as impacted and not have access to resources like housing. And you gotta have housing.
I just love this whole thing that you're doing, because everything that you are about, down to your soul, is encapsulated into what you can do with this, and it's so needed. It's so needed. You just listed off as all the different places and people that need this, and on top of it, it's a nice living environment. So it makes a lot of sense.
I gotta get
That's what I say. Even like
It is
95% of people come out of prison. 95% of people in prison come out one day, right? They're gonna return back to the same community that they once were in, sometimes victimizing other people. And it's like, what do you want these people to be when they come out? Better neighbors, better criminals. Good neighbors are better criminals. And if we don't give people from incarceration access to resources and the ability to change their lives, then we're only creating a less safe society. We're actually, by default, saying de facto we're pro-crime. So, like,
it sounds like to me,
increases.
you have lived through those layers, because you would have probably, Danny, have been back in, except for the fact that you went through the mental health court, were able to get all those resources, and now you have something to grab onto. You got some side things to grab onto, so you're not just falling down, a hole that keeps
a
getting
strong
bigger.
foundation.
Yeah, big
Mental health court 100% saved my life, and that's when you put rehabilitation as the norm and punishment, or prison as the alternative. Like, that should always be the alternative. Like, and I think that if we look at mental health and substance abuse, if we look at our criminal justice system, just look at that as a public health crisis and not a morality issue. Because I think in America we treat crime, but we don't treat people, and we look at it from a morality issue. We think it's bad people who need to become good rather than sick people who need to become well. And there's good people that make bad decisions in active addiction, that make bad decisions, in moments of not thinking clearly. So, like, that really, because it gave me the tools and the access. I had a lot of childhood trauma, and some people deal with trauma on their own, and they're able to, they live great lives, and they never commit a crime, and they never get addicted. I have so much love for those people, so much respect and admiration, because I wish I would have been that person, but I wasn't. And, for the longest time, I carried so much shame and guilt thinking I was a bad person. Like, I wanted to end my life. It's because I thought I was a bad person. And when society's telling you you're a bad person, You know, because yeah, I made a lot of bad decisions. I hurt a lot of people, and I have a lot of regrets for that. You know, the emotional pain I felt my family and people around me, but I was a sick person. And once I started to look at my life from that perspective, that like, you know, like you're not a bad person. You weren't a bad kid. I don't think there's anything as such thing as bad kids. You know, there might be some troubled kids or kids that, you know, that
Yeah.
more attention and love. But
Well, the other thing, Danny, that I think is interesting from a lot of different angles is, you know, you're really popular on TikTok. And I think it's your vulnerability and the rawness of, you don't have to, you know, there's a lot of people out there saying things and not living it, you know, or believing, that they're saying it but not believing it, and, or it's a facade. I think one of the things that I like about that
Okay.
platform is there's a lot of people that are ex-felons on that platform, and,
Yes.
you know, Sabrina Morgan's another
And
one
can
that's
actually
really
be
popular on
heard.
there, just because she's really,
Rather than
Open.
suppressed like other
and I think that's
platforms.
why people are drawn to your posts and what you're doing and what you're saying. And I think it can help a lot of people. You know, that's the thing, is, you know, a lot of people say these platforms are bad, which I think there's some things that, you know, kids have a really tough time with social media and the bullying and everything, but there are some really good things that can come from it too. Like the things that you do with your posts, and Sabrina, those actually are helping people grab onto something because they feel like they have nowhere to turn. So, thank God you're doing that, because, you know, I so respect the fact that have what we have, you have two ways to go with it. You can hide and hope that nobody finds out who you are, which I don't think you can do at this day and age. There's too many ways to Google and find you.
yeah, right.
But the other thing is to lead with it and try to help people so that they can find a different path. And that's what you're doing through what you're doing with your work, what you're doing with your social media. And that's why I was really excited to talk to you, because I think, you know, hopefully we can get more Danny Collins out there that
Yes.
you know, spread the word that you don't have
That
to
ain't the way to go.
live a life that you don't want to live. You can actually improve it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. And hopefully we get more people that, that destigmatize, you know, people that have been incarcerated, justice impacted, or people that, you know, suffer from mental health and substance abuse, and then we can start doing some more preventative stuff to stop people going
Yes.
down that road. Like, ultimately,
Better
I would love to
prevent.
do that as well, is like admonish our youth to not, you know, because choices have consequences, man, and the choices that we make.
That's where the money
You know,
should be given
It
instead of
can change
incarcerated,
your life, and
incarcerated,
you
incarcerated.
can still pull yourself out of the ditch, but it would preferable not to go
Given
in.
in those
Yeah, preferable
places.
not to go in the ditch, absolutely.
Or for your case, going into a lake of water and.
Yeah, canal.
What a metaphor.
I think that's the other two things too, is that minimize the impact that my story can have, or like how crazy it really was. Because I think a lot of people tell me, like, you should write a book, or your story is like a movie, and I think
So
I
well
minimize it a
spoken.
lot. Like, oh, it's not that
But
unique.
you know why? It's because you've lived it.
I've lived it,
You know,
yeah.
I was talking to a group of college kids the other day, and once I got talking about it, I realized how weird it was what I just said, that I was a 15-year-old kid that went to visit my dad in prison. And then
Oh, and then he.
I got out of prison at 50 years old, and I went back to visit my dad in the same visiting room in that same prison. And
Yeah,
he had been in twice, but then they were like, Dad, you're really messed up. And I said, well, I didn't know I was messed up, but maybe that sounds really messed up.
yeah, it becomes so normal for us, right? Become desensitized, and I think that even the second time I went to prison, I was desensitized to prison. Like, you know, because it's.
You were already there.
It's one, I gotta go, guys, cause I gotta drive.
Yeah,
But I just have
Hey, I
to
love this conversation,
outline,
and I always
draw
ask
in his
people,
eyes,
you know,
his mouth,
at the end of
nose,
our
the
interview,
features.
all the things that you just said
Put a little
about the fact that
signature,
it probably should be.
I guess
think
his
it should be
shirt,
a
but I
book,
may not have time to do
what
the
you
shirt,
put
so
on your
that may
journey.
not get done,
What
cause
do you
it's
think
last
your
minute.
biggest takeaway through
But
all that
it
you've
was
been
my
to
sister's
now?
birthday, so that comes first, celebrating with her.
I mean, for me, the biggest thing is finding out who I am. you know, as a person, being true to who I am. Like I said, my identity was always in baseball or the things that I did, and not, you know, just
And he lived so many
learning
different lives.
more about myself and taking that time
many
to
different
understand, you know, me and
I think he's just a little younger than me.
consciously like getting to know myself. So
At first, I didn't think it was coming
yeah,
out good.
definitely, because I think a lot of times that I sought validation through everybody else, whether it's through baseball, whether
Yeah.
it's through a relationship,
Yeah, when
or
people
going
don't
home from
validate
school,
you.
and never really
Then you,
being comfortable. And like you said, trying to hide. You know, like now I'm an open book. You know, and I make myself as vulnerable as I possibly can. You know, I think there's this misconception that, you know, what an alpha male or a beta male, you hear that stuff, people say that stuff all the time, but like I think people that, you know, men that are able to open up, make themselves vulnerable, and talk about their emotions and feelings, and just be real.
Yeah, it's healthy.
Yeah, it helps. It makes a difference, because I think I was always taught that, you know, men don't do that. Men don't talk about feelings. Men don't cross, you know, like emotions, and you don't share your weaknesses and vulnerabilities, because, especially if you think about prison, is that you can't do that in there. You know, like you will open yourself up for becoming a victim and being victimized. You know, and we live in a society that kind of teaches you that. So like it's, I would say that's the biggest thing.
I think that's
People
huge. I
definitely
mean,
come
that's a
for
great
you.
takeaway too. You know, you gotta find
True.
yourself, otherwise you.
All right, guys, we going to
That
sleep.
you're doing things that you should
Go
probably
check
be
out
doing.
this video. I'll link it later. I'm finna lay
Things that
down.
you haven't dealt with, and if you can find out who you are and where you.
All right, hiss your girl Cadillac. Battery going to bed anyway.